Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night, and welcome to Prog Chattery 777. We're continuing our chat on Max Webster, and we've made it to their third studio album, Mutiny Up My Sleeve, released in 1978. Now I'll say this, right off the bat. If I had to pick a personal favorite Max Webster album, I think this is the one. I think Mutiny Up My Sleeve is a brilliant record. It's a sublime slice of really good, creative 70s rock music, and I think it belongs in anybody's record collection. Anyone that's interested in classic 70s rock music, you gotta have Mutiny Up My Sleeve in there. It's just brilliant. As far as the band was concerned, at this point, they had recently just endured a lineup change. We have a new bass player for this record. So the lineup, as far as the instruments are concerned, on Mutiny Up My Sleeve include Kim Mitchell on vocals and guitar, Terry Watkinson on keyboards, Gary McCracken on drums, and Dave Miles on the bass, replacing Mike Tilka. Also on board, of course, we have the wonderfully wacky wordsmith Pi Dubois, fulfilling his role as lyricist for the band. So all the pieces of the puzzle are very much in place on this record. And you get a really good sense of momentum when you compare this to the first two albums. Even though they had recently endured a lineup change, I think Mike Tilka was very integral to the band in those early days. And lineup changes like that can be a traumatic experience for a band. So the quality of the songs on this album really indicate the momentum that the band had and that they were pursuing. They weren't going to let a lineup change slow them down, which is good. And Dave Miles does a great job on the album. He lays down a great foundation, and he fits into the bass playing role quite effortlessly. It sounds like. But when you compare Mutiny Up My Sleeve to the first two Max albums, I would say the big thing is that it's much darker. It takes the foundations that are laid on the self-titled album and High Class and Borrowed Shoes. So that balance between Kim Mitchell's guitar and Terry Watkinson's keyboard is very much, they've really refined that down to a great art on this album. You could say they refined that on High Class and Borrowed Shoes, but it's even more refined on Mutiny Up My Sleeve. And the result is an album that's a little bit more complex, a little bit darker, and a little bit, there's a seriousness to Mutiny Up My Sleeve. A lot of the tracks, anyway, not all of them. But there is a certain depth to a lot of the songs on here, which I've always found very, very appealing. And it's probably their proggiest album. The whole question about, is Max Webster a progressive rock band? Well, technically no. They never quite went as far as bands like ELP or Genesis or Yes or whatever. But that thread of progressive influence that runs through all of their albums is probably most obvious on this one. And it has their best epic as well. And definitely my all-time favorite Max Webster song is on here at the very end. Which I'm going to talk about when I talk about the tracks, which is just after I mention the album cover, which conveys the mood of the album. Like I said, it's dark and kind of melancholic at times. I'm not exactly sure what we're looking at here. I'm not sure if that's like some weird x-ray of a spinal column or a spinal cord or what. But it's a cool album cover. We get the kind of the blown glass band moniker there, which is cool. We get the funky uniforms on the back as well as the shattered glass. Quite cool. Anyway, now we'll talk about the tracks. So, the album opens with Lip Service. Classic Max Webster song right here. I love this song. It's got a great guitar riff. One of those really great, dirgy, sleazy kind of riffs. Great guitar riff, but it doesn't dominate the keyboards. The keyboards are very, very present in that whole mix. And then, towards the chorus, we get that keyboard riff that kind of leads it. So it's a very definitive Max Webster song in a lot of ways, and that it's kind of a up-tempo, sleazy kind of a rocker with a great balance between the guitar and the keyboards. Great keyboard solo in there, some great guitar playing in there. He's got a really nice sustainy kind of solo at one point, which is really, really, really tasteful. But Kim Mitchell's just a phenomenal guitar player. He's so underrated. He's a great player, and his playing on this album is superb. The lyrics on Lip Service are great. It's that classic bizarre Pi Dubois thing. There's almost like a kind of sense of political. He's writing politically, but there's something about Pi Dubois' lyrics where it's so surreal that you can't really derive any specific meaning, even though it sounds like there is a meaning to it. It's very, very strange, and he's one of my favorite lyricists. But there's some references to Soviet leaders, Khrushchev, and Lennon and whatnot, and it's quite interesting. I think the whole song is like lyrically what it's about is kind of taking the piss out of the rich, really. You know, lines like, "Oh, you should be down under, pushing up wheat for the hungry." You know, that's kind of saying, "Hey, you've got all this wealth. Why don't you contribute?" I'm just guessing. You know me. I don't really like to assess lyrics too much, but I mean, Pi Dubois' lyrics need to have some sort of mention. But there's some great lines. So you're the lawyer's wife. How's life on Lakeshore Road? I assume that's talking about Lakeshore Road in Ontario, which goes along the north shore of Lake Ontario, where there's lots of very large houses and lots of politicians and lawyers and doctors and rich types tend to live along that road. There's a great line in the second verse too. So you're the canker banker. How's 9 to 5 on fantasies of gold, vets, check, cigars, Nassau, and your harness horse is cold cash because the drugs you use work fast, burned off and out before the racetrack urine test. I don't know exactly what these lyrics mean, but they're just interesting. You know, racetrack urine test. There's another great line. Only your right hand knows you're left-handed, which is, it sounds profound and it sounds like there's some sort of deep meaning, but if you think about it too much, you'll get a headache. Anyway, Lip Service is a great track. Let's move on throughout the album. We get to track 2 of side 1, Astonish Me. Now this is a great track. I love the intro. This was written by Terry Watkinson, although Watkinson doesn't sing on this album. It's very interesting. He contributes 2 songs, but doesn't sing either one of them, which is interesting. But Astonish Me is probably my favorite Watkinson song of this album anyway. Like I said, the intro is very nice, very eloquent and tasteful piano intro, which is a proggy thing. You kind of get that proggy vibe after all the sleaziness of Lip Service. To get this very eloquent and nice, you know, piano intro is it's a great tonal shift for the album. And there's some great synth work that comes in there, and the song, you know, kind of creeps up on you. It's so quiet at the beginning, but it does have a very frantic riff that comes in. Great stuff. And it's got a great rise. Like I said, it creeps up on you. Once that chorus comes in, you know, get off that air of mystery. What's the line? Get off that air of mystery. Reach down into your silence and astonish me. That lyric just soars over top so nicely, and there's this great sort of little ascending guitar line. It's a fantastic track. And then towards the end, we get a neat little. It's almost like a false ending, I guess, where you get all these synthy keyboard sounds from just Watkinson alone, and then it ramps its way back into a final chorus again. Great track. Astonish Me is one of my favorite Terry Watkinson songs. A great track on Mutiny Up My Sleeve. We get to track 3. We get another Terry Watkinson song, "Let Your Man Fly." Now this is funny. It doesn't strike me as one of the Watkinson tracks of Max Webster, because it is a very much, you know, an up-tempo, rocky kind of a thing, and it starts with the guitars. So I always tend to think that first riff was written by Mitchell, but as the song goes in, you can hear the keyboards playing along to that riff. But it's a good little rock song. There's a couple of, you know, cool little hooks that sneak its way in there. It's just a tiny thing. Not one of the best things on the album, but it certainly belongs on the album, and you know, contributes to a nice flow. So we'll move on to track 4. We get "Water Me Down." Now this might be one of the most light and tranquil tracks that Max Webster ever did. Just an acoustic ballad, very folky. The beginning almost sounds kind of like a country song. It's definitely not a country song though, more folky. But it's really nice. It's a very sweet, tender, you know, ballad, and it still has those Pi Dubois lyrics. It's got one of my favorite Pi Dubois lines, actually. I really like the line, "Let me dream out this galaxy." There's it's such a simple lyric, but there's so many layers to it. And it's just a beautiful, you know, series of words put together, and put in context of the song and with the melody and everything. It's really good. Underrated Max song. It's one that, you know, as a kid I never really, you know, gave it much attention because I wanted to rock and I like the high energy songs. But "Water Me Down" is a great ballad on the record, and another one of those overseen classics, I think. We move on to track 5, which closes out side 1, "Distressed." Fantastic Max song, and this is another thing that it's very underrated in the catalog. I don't think they played Distressed live too often. But this is where that dark melancholy that I was talking about really kind of rears its head, as far as I see it. It's got that really weird syncopated staccato beginning. boom, da. It's kind of it's a strange intro, but it winds its way into this nice, very smooth, almost jazzy kind of a thing. It kind of reminds me a little bit of the second half of Context of the Moon from High Class and Borrowed Shoes, but it's much darker than that. Like I said, especially with the vocal melody, you know, there's almost a yearning or something like that comes along, and again, like the weird lyrics in put on top of that very dramatic chorus are just, it's so you know, it's a strange chorus. You know, we get that big dramatic da 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 da. It's I am perplexed, I am distressed. Where did I park my wheels? Where indeed did I park my damn wheels? But yeah, definitely a really good song, and it builds up. There's all kinds of little guitar themes that you know, build up as the song goes along. And there's some cool, you know, there's cool little licks towards the end, like right in the middle of the verse, we get that diddle, 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 diddle. I don't know if you'll know the part that I'm talking about there, but it's really cool. And when it all winds up and the ending comes, we get that syncopated part, ba da da da, ba da da da. It's almost like a surprise ending. It ends on a weird note, but it's a great track, dark, jazzy. You know, there's almost a fusion-y kind of an element to it, but not necessarily typical of all of Max Webster's stuff, but it's a classic track. And the guitar playing on Distressed as well is very notable. You know, there is certainly a thread of Frank Zappa in Max Webster's collection. I didn't realize this, but I was doing a little extra research there the other day, and it turns out that Max Webster used to play Peaches en Regalia by Frank Zappa, as well as Cletus Auritus Auritus, which is very interesting and very telling. You know, there is a Zappa thread that runs through the Max catalog, which is quite interesting. But yeah, Distress is great, and the guitar playing on Distress, that's what I was talking about. I hear a Frank Zappa influence in Kim's guitar playing, which is very interesting, and it's some of those little licks that pop up throughout that song definitely remind me of Zappa, so very good and interesting. Anyway, moving along, we flip the record over, we get to side 2, which opens with The Party, one of the classic Max Webster songs. It is exactly what the title suggests. It is a great party song. There's so many riffs. I mean, I imagine, you know, going to parties in the 70s in Canada and, you know, parts of the States and whatnot, and throwing this song on, and it just would have been so appropriate at a classic, you know, 70s party. Not that I really know what that was like. I wasn't born until 1990, but I kind of get the vibe of 70s party with The Party. But yeah, so many great riffs. You know, it is that classic Max Webster thing. Opens up with the sound of an audience. I don't think it's a live recording though. It's just a recording of an audience. And the song itself is still done in the studio, but got a very unconventional structure. I mean, even though it's all, you know, it's about this kind of crazy party that's going on, it's got that proggy thing. You know, there's nothing conventional about that song structure whatsoever. We get those, you know, ascending bits. You know, climb in a cloud, climb in a cloud. We kind of get the narrated bits, like the verses. Here's Lucy, she's choosy, who calls her on the phone, and that's a Zappa thing with that too. There's definitely a big thread of Zappa in a lot of Max Webster, as I'm coming to realize. But yeah, it's just fantastic. There's a great bit of keyboard on it, great bit of guitar solo on it. You know, what more can be said? The Party is one of the classic Max Webster songs. Let me see if I can find some funny lyrics here. Oh, the best lyric on this one is, "We're just musicians here to thin the thickness of your skin." That's fantastic. There's something so memorable about Pi Dubois' words that really create a sort of mythology behind all of Max Webster's existence, and yeah, there's a lot of those kind of references, those lyrical references in The Party. Classic song. Anyway, we move on. Track 2 of side 2, track 7 overall. We get Waterline. I think a lot of people would say that this is a classic Max Webster track. It's a good track. It's not one of my favorites. It doesn't really stand out for me on the album, probably because it comes after The Party, which is so great. And Waterline is kind of a slower tempo, laid back, kind of a rocker. It's got lots of great moments in it. You know, there's a great kind of little jammy section that's kind of got a nice, you know, noodly guitar solo. I don't mean noodly in a bad way. It's sounds like noodling. It sounds like jamming. It's a very loose, groovy kind of a jam. It's almost like a very slow-paced High Class and Borrowed Shoes, I guess. But not to, you know, compare them. They are very different songs, obviously. But yeah, it's this cool riff, you know, laid back kind of a groovy thing, and rising slowly to meet the water line, yeah. Yeah. So we'll move on. Track 3 of side 2, track 8 overall, Hawaii. This is Max Webster's first instrumental. It's a strange kind of a piece, really. There's very little that seems Max Webster-y about it. It's very acoustic, and it kind of goes through 3 or 4 distinct, movements, I guess. The beginning is kind of funny. Oh, my headaches are all gone, and it's morning, and the song. Again, there's so many references to partying in Max Webster's collection, and hangovers, and this and that. And yeah, Hawaii. It's a very nice little piece. I don't really see it as a song as itself. It's more of like a transition to the album, or an intro to the final track, which is of course Beyond the Moon. Not to dismiss Hawaii, because it is a nice little piece, but like I said, it's more of an intro to Beyond the Moon. And Beyond the Moon, for me, is Max Webster's definitive moment. I think it is Max Webster's very best song. It's just brilliant, and I mean, the prog connection is very obvious with a song like Beyond the Moon. There's all kinds of different sections to it. It's big, it's epic, it's loud, it builds into a frenzy, and it blows your mind. It did with my, naive 12-year-old mind. As a very young kid throwing this album on, my young impressionable ears were exposed to Beyond the Moon, and I remember it sent the hairs on the back of my neck standing right up on end. It was so good. It begins with that kind of frenzied acoustic guitar thing. It's a crazy intro. We get that big crunching riff, and it's so anthemic, isn't it? And again, it's all about Pai Dubois' lyrics. There's something with Pai Dubois. I was thinking it earlier today. It's a John Anderson thing, but Pai Dubois does it much better. I hate to pick on John Anderson from Yes, but John Anderson would think more about what the words look like and say, oh, this sings well, that's a cosmic sounding thing, and the end result is that it all kind of sounds like nonsense. It doesn't sound like he's really saying anything. And Pai Dubois is almost like a complete mirror image of that, in that he's writing almost nonsense and just kind of weird, just words that sound cool, but it sounds like it means something. It sounds very profound. It sounds like he's saying something in a language that you can't translate, that is like the most mind-bending prophecy you're ever going to hear. At least on Beyond the Moon. The lyrics on Beyond the Moon sound prophetic. There's 2,000 years we crossed the devil, thinking, that's not the line. 2,000 years we kissed the devil before we knew defeat. 2,000 years we crossed up Jesus, thinking he'd make ends meet. Christ, no. It's not like it means anything specifically, but it just, like I said, it just feels very powerful. And of course, some of Pai Dubois' best lyrics are in that middle section. So after we get the acoustic intro and the first big riff, it goes into the Terry Watkinson section, which is very keyboard-led, very spacey, very atmospheric. One of my favorite moments in Max Webster is that little section where we get chapter eating Mark's one morning, freaking out on electric meat, chewing thrills with Turkish madmen, space speed to Sweden without sleep, cocaine-colored computer cards, coding cosmic zipper skies, vitamin clouds beyond the moon, yogurt blood, lunacy shoes. It's one of my favorite runs of just surreal, bizarre, outlandish, crazy lyrics that I've ever heard. I love that section. And like I said, those words coupled with that atmospheric Terry Watkinson keyboard stuff is just nothing short of brilliant. It's a highlight moment in their entire career. There's other lines like acid warp the global fetus like the bourgeois look at feet and Cadillacs. What does that mean? Who knows, but it's great. And as the song winds up, it goes into kind of a big middle section, which reprises the melody that Kim sings over the atmospheric part, the Watkinson part, but he does it on the guitar. And by the time it gets to the final verse and the whole riff is there, and I'm kind of rambling totally incoherently now. Usually it's slightly incoherent, but Beyond the Moon is a song that does that to me. You need to listen to it. The guitar playing is phenomenal as well. Towards the end, we get that that constant epic shredding. It's not that he's doing anything really, really hard, but it just sounds perfect. And it is an absolutely phenomenal track. You have a reason to be endless. That's another great line. And then towards the very end, we get that big riff. Boom, down, 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 boom, down. We get that riff, and then Terry Watkinson's keyboards, that big, that I don't know what the hell sound he's using, but that kind of oozes out of the mix, and it's just absolutely brilliant. Beyond the Moon, career highlight for as far as I'm concerned. Max Webster's very best song, and that might be controversial. Some of you may disagree with me, but it's a pretty easy choice for me. And that wraps up the album. It is appropriately the final song on the album, because you can't really put a song after that, after your mind is blown by that. So that there wraps up Mutiny Up My Sleeve. Thank you very much for putting up with my near incoherent rambling. It did become properly incoherent there for a little bit. I appreciate your patience, everybody. So stay tuned for more Max Webster chats. The next album, of course, will be Paradise Skies. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and all the rest of it. And you will see me in the future for, or it's not Paradise Skies, A Million Vacations is the next album. My mistake. Sorry about that. A Million Vacations is next. You will see me then. Thanks again, everybody.